I saw this founder who was posting this story that said, my payroll company didn't file my taxes properly. Now I have a criminal record.
We're going to dive into something that I think every founder hates, but you can't escape: business bullshit.
When we actually first launched Central, there was no web UI. There was just a Slack bot. You can just say, reimburse me, and paste in a receipt. And it will pre-fill your expense report and then put it right there in Slack. We can have a view of your finances. You just say, I need to change this person's salary. And right from Slack, you're able to change the salary, set the effective date, and then be done. And we get to this place where we're hosting a advanced LLM locally and can just take all your company and say help me figure stuff out, right? First it was 10, then 20, then 30, and 40% of new customers were actually migrating from incumbents. It was just validation that yes, this pain point exists.
As soon as you solved all of the bullshit that exists today, we'll have a new administration in some city, some state, some federal government, and there'll be all sorts of new bullshit.
Yeah, it's an evergreen problem.
Welcome to Tech Finance. I'm your host, Sasha Orloff, repeat founder and current CEO of Puzzle, and self-professed finance nerd. On this show, we dive into the pulse of B2B fintech, from newly funded startups transforming the office of the CFO to major industry shifts, deals, and partnerships that are reshaping how we think about finance. You'll hear the most important developments, essential analysis, and of course, AI innovations. This show is brought to you by Puzzle and the Turpentine Podcast Network. Let's dive in.
Let's go. All right. So as you guys know, this is just the show where you can learn about the latest breakthroughs in AI and how it impacts the back office, and cool ass startups that recently raised funding that are working on the office of the CEO for back office. So today we're going to dive into something that I think every founder hates, but you can't escape. So I'm going to borrow from Central's view, but business bullshit. You know the drill: payroll setups, multi-state compliance, random government letters that make you what the heck is going on? All the PTO and stuff. None of us started a business to do that stuff. So today's guest is somebody who is on a mission to kill all the business bullshit. And if you're in San Francisco, you have certainly seen the billboards, and they're quite provocative. So Josh, co-founder and CEO of Central, who is just announcing an $8.6 million round from none other than First Round Capital and YC to build what they call the first autonomous back office for startups. In other words, you have a teammate that lives in Slack and they just handle the stuff, which is kind of basically what we do anyway as a remote company. So I'm excited to learn more and excited to share the story. Josh, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks, Sasha. Glad to be here.
All right, let's get into it. What was the moment where you were this is insane, there's got to be a better way?
First of all, we me and my co-founders, we've all started companies before. We've worked on a lot of these problems ourselves, and each of us independently had so many pain points, which just we have an idea, think, hey, I want to start a business, and then immediately be well, do I really want to start a business? Because there's so much bullshit you have to deal with. But there's this, I think it's kind of funny. It's funny to me. I don't know if it's funny to everybody, but I saw this founder who was posting this story that said, my payroll company didn't file my taxes properly, and now I have a criminal record. And I looked into this more, and it wasn't the fault of the payroll company, but just because of the way the world works today is that you have a lot of software that will help you do the work if you know what you need to do. And it won't help you do all of it. It'll help you do some of the work. And so in this particular instance, they basically every year, in any state you have employees in, will send you an unemployment insurance rate for that year. And if you don't take that amount and put it into your payroll software, then you're effectively sending the wrong amount of taxes. The payroll software won't know the right tax rate. And so this is kind of what happened here. But the other thing is that founders move all the time. So the state starts sending these notices to their headquarter address, but maybe they got into YC and moved to San Francisco or something like that. And so this person was getting these notices, but they weren't ever receiving them because it was just to some old address that they didn't even have access to anymore. And so the payroll company didn't know about this. The founder didn't know about this. And then sometime after sending a bunch of notices, the state's all right, this is a criminal problem now. And they had no idea, right? I get why the system operates the way it does today, but the question is why does it have to be the way it operates today? And, I think that's just a really classic example of the kinds of problems that Central's setting out to solve, which is you can go start a business without having to worry about this kind of problem anymore.
What I'm sort of hearing you say is like there's a set of complexity on the back end, and that is just going to exist. It's state law, it's local law, it's county law, it's federal law. But if you build a solution from the back forward, you lose the sort of the actual root cause of the problem, which is like, I'm a hurt human building a business. I want to do everything right. And I have this complexity. So it's, and sometimes it's like an address, and sometimes it's a form, and sometimes, but like you need to take this really like human founder centric view of like solving it from problem backwards as opposed to like trying to like adapt a UX forward.
Yeah.
Is that right? Or is there like anything that I'm missing in there?
Yeah, I think it's a few I mean, I think about it like, first of all, yes, there's just like a set of what people think of as the cost of doing business. And there is this cost to doing business. I think the question is that cost too high? And I think our answer was like, we believe it is too high. And we think that we can get the cost to doing business to approach zero. And so then you think like, okay, well, how do you go about doing that? And I think there's no like silver bullet. I think there's like a few things that you have to do. And, one of them is definitely rethinking things from first principles. Like, why do these problems all exist? And I think one of the reasons that they exist today is that each individual company has like 80% of the same setup as like another company, but there's always like these kind of edge cases and these bespoke situations with each company. And I think that, you know, with all of the advancements that we're seeing in AI, it creates this opportunity to take something that used to require some level of reasoning that SaaS companies were just like, nope, this is too, like, we can't write rigid rules around this. So we're just going to punt it back to the user and they'll have to figure it out. And I think for us, it's like, no, I think today and certainly, tomorrow, the technology will be there where we can take an end-to-end view of things and say, you just tell us what you're trying to accomplish. And then we can take it from there all the way through to completion and then come back with like, yeah, we're done. And here's the proof.
So I acknowledge and recognize the problem as a repeat founder myself, and seeing this as an angel investor in like a lot of companies. But like there are other, payroll centric companies out there that have raised billions of dollars. There's publicly traded companies that have existed for generations. Like, why do you think this problem still exists?
Yeah, great question. I think, first of all, the market's huge. So there's a lot of different needs in this market. When you think about payroll, it's like, yeah, every company runs payroll. But the needs of different companies at different sizes are, I think, completely different. And so I think one of them is we're really hyper focused on founders and SMBs. And so the solution that a lot of these other companies have come up with are just not the right solution for our target customers. So that eliminates, like, I think, a good set of incumbents in terms of just who are you really focused on. And then I think there's this question too, like, well, why can't these incumbents just like decide to focus on these people? And I think to your point, well, one reason is they raised $1 billion. So when you raise $1 billion, your outcomes need to be, there is a cap to the total market of the SMB space. Now, I think it's significantly higher than what people believe today. And I think it's actually going to grow a bunch. But I think that's one reason why so many of these incumbents have been like, no, we need to go mid market, then we need to go enterprise. That was always the classic playbook. But we don't think so. We think that there's both a massive business and a massive problem in the SMB space. And so within the SMB space, there's still folks that do payroll. And I think that, these companies were built over a decade ago, most of these companies, and some further. And again, when you think about what are the actual problems, how do you get to an end-to-end solution? It requires rethinking everything from the ground up and both rethinking the user experience and like what you're taking on as a company and how you're going to solve these. So, I even try to shy away from saying like Central's a payroll company because, and this is why we say like eliminating business bullshit is like that our scope is not to do payroll. Payroll is just one of the pain points. As like we also do bookkeeping and tax filing as one of our product offerings. And, over time we want to offer more and more and kind of just go down the laundry list of like, as a founder or as a company who's hired like a generalist operations person to deal with this back office work, what are all the jobs to be done with that person? And can you have like a one-stop solution that you can use in this declarative way to just say, I'm trying to do this task and it just gets done. Right. And so, I think that with the incumbents that are out there today, there's both a lot of inertia and like innovators dilemma and how they're going to solve these problems. They're not focusing on the ICP in the same way that we are. And, we get a chance to take a really fresh take on solving these problems.
Hey, we'll get back to the conversation in a moment after a word from our sponsors. All right. One of my favorite tools that I use and we use is Notion. Notion is used by thousands of startups around the world as their connected workspace for everything from engineering specs to new hire onboarding to fundraising. Notion has a special offer for listeners. 6 months of free Notion with unlimited AI, value of over $6,000. So you can access the limitless power of AI right inside of Notion to build and scale your company and team with one tool. Get 6 months free of Notion with unlimited AI, along with custom templates when you apply for notion.com/startups/puzzle. Once again, that's notion.com/startups/puzzle. Go for it. There's a shift happening today in accounting. Startups aren't just building products faster, they're rethinking how they run their business too. Accounting shouldn't be stuck in the past. Puzzle is leading a new movement with an AI-first ledger built for speed, automation, and real-time decision-making. No more waiting for month end, no more manual reconciliations, just financials that keep up with you. The future of accounting isn't spreadsheets, it's AI-driven, intuitive, and built for the next generation of companies. Join the movement today at puzzle.io and take control of your future.
All right, so I'm going to force the hand a little bit more because I think that Essential is a really differentiated take on how you guys build and how you interface with your clients. So tell us a little bit more about how you're approaching building your product.
Yeah. When we actually first launched Central, there was no web UI. There was just a Slack bot. So we have a bot that was in Slack that, from a vision standpoint, it was like, we're building this AI employee for your back office work. We've gone a little bit short of calling it an AI employee, I think, because the market got so saturated with everybody being like, we're building an AI employee. And that's not exactly the whole point of Central. But the idea, again, going back to how do you solve this problem for founders, is you don't want them to have to understand the details of it. So we wanted to be able to say, like, well, how do they express? How does somebody that needs to hire someone or change a salary, like, how are they thinking about it? Well, they're thinking about it in natural language. They're thinking about it in their head, like, I need to change this person's salary. And so what we built is a way where you can say exactly that. You just say, I need to change this person's salary. And right from Slack, you're able to see their current salary, you're able to change the salary, set the effective date, and then be done. And the idea is, like, you can just get work done at the speed of thought. And so that's a big part of how we think we can improve the efficiencies of just getting the job done for founders.
What I always really appreciated when I first saw a demo and heard the vision, and was so excited to share the story more, is like, this is just how I operate anyway. Like, my HR person is a person on the other side of Slack. I don't talk with her very often. We don't do videos very often because we could just like communicate. Here's an offer that we want to have. Hey, this person's getting a promotion. Hey, this person is moving on to their next opportunity. Hey, what are these bands? Hey, what is my cash? Hey, like, I have a biz ops person and I have a HR person, and we have all these different people, and I'm just asking them on Slack. And so Central just like slides right into where you do work, how you do work, and sort of the proliferation of Slack as the tool and LLMs become such a natural complement. It's just like so seamless that, like, I haven't seen anybody else doing this. I'm sure others are, some have, but like, it's so cool to now have these infrastructures where you can actually interface via APIs. But it's still mind blowing to me that you like are building a company for all intents and purposes without a website. Like, you're just, it's like on the other side of Slack. It's mind blowing to me. And when you hear that and you think about, how did I used to do payroll? When I started my first company, I would get on the phone twice a month with our legacy payroll provider, like 15 years ago. We would review everything in a file. They would send it over and we would do it. And then the next generation of like kind of web came along, and you're like, oh, I could just sort of see it on a screen and like hit submit, but then I have to go in and like click through on a screen. The fact that like LLMs and API calls are getting so powerful that you can do this with like the natural language of a human to me is like one of those, you can't unsee it or you can't unhear it to me. I
Yeah.
guess if you're depending on whether you're listening on like Spotify or you're watching on YouTube, but like it's crazy to me. I still can't believe it. I'm so excited about what you're doing.
Yeah. And I think that I really believe that this is going to be the future of how companies build their interfaces, because there's this other really great byproduct that you get here where if you start with Slack or any bot, right? Like it doesn't have to be Slack, it could be some sort of other chat interface. But for us, it's Slack. That's where most of our customers do their work in, and we wanted to live right where, as you mentioned, like live where they're doing their work. But what this enables is like, as a founder or as somebody using Central, I say what I want to do, right? And then if the question or the problem is more nuanced than, say, like the technology is caught up to, or that maybe the bot currently can't handle it, or it's just some kind of like really long tail request, we are able to seamlessly transition the interaction from like an AI interaction into a human interaction. So traditionally it's like you go to some website to do the job. You try to figure out, where in this website do I need to go to do the job? I'm not sure how to do it. So I go to a help article. Okay, now I'm in the help article and that's not answering my questions. So let me go to like the support email and open a ticket. And then I'll wait to get back on the ticket. And that whole process is completely distilled down to just one little thread that, and a lot of our customers are like, ultimately, they don't care how the job gets done. They're just like, great, I said what I needed. I could leave, come back, and it was done. Right. And, I think that's been one of the really great, it says, kind of side effects of building our main user interface right there in Slack.
Yeah, I guess what you're saying is a lot of it is discrete tasks. Like a lot of the back office work is like, here's the thing, and it just needs to get done. And then there are cases where I don't know, or I need to like think through, and maybe LLMs and AI is doing a good job and we'll get better time. And there are certain things that you just want to talk to a human. But all of it can literally it can all be done in Slack. So I love that. I guess like one of the things that leads to though is like, how do I trust? How do I know what's happening, or how do I trust, or how do you build and design for that?
Yeah. Early on, we decided we were going to have this kind of design principle with like right-based actions. And I think you see this more now, like for folks that are, software engineers that are using Cursor or something like that, this kind of exists too. But any right-based action, we don't just do the thing. We present what we're about to do, and with the inputs that are about to be executed. And so at the end of this sort of workflow, there's always this deterministic step of, okay, here's what I'm about to execute. And it's essentially the same deterministic step that you would get to if you were navigating this like complex UI hierarchy, and then found the thing you wanted to do in the product, and then inputted the data that you wanted to change, and then you hit save, right? And so that's been I think a design pattern that served us really well. And in fact, a lot of times the interactions with the LLMs end up being almost more accurate than they would get if they were doing this on their own. Because a lot of it's like, oh, I need to take some number from this document and put it into the form, right? And be able to just saying like, here, actually, I want to. One example of the thing that we do in the product is you can just say reimburse me and paste in a receipt, and it will basically pre-fill your expense report and then put it right there in Slack and say like, okay, submit. I think we get less errors from folks that way than them typing, the numbers in themselves. So
Totally. Where do you think the LLMs, the AI today are performing really well? And where are you excited about where it gets better over the next, 18 to 36 months?
yeah, I mean, I think today, like identifying intent, I think they're really good at identifying intent, which is a big way that we use them. I think, of course, all the stuff that you see with like summarizing documents, like being able to chat with the whole first gen of all the LLM apps was like chat with your PDFs and things like that. And of course, they're good at that. I think the agentic behavior of LLMs has gotten better. And at the end of the day, it's kind of like, what context does the LLM have access to? How well does it understand that context? And how well can it plan sort of the next thing it needs to do, right? And so, of course, I think as context windows grow, that'll allow us to do more and more. Like, I think the experience will get more and more magical. So it's like, you could imagine where it's like, Central is the system of record for your employee and employer data. And you're doing, bookkeeping with Central too. And it's like, okay, great. So like we can have a view of your finances. And, we get to this place where like we're hosting a advanced LLM locally and can just like take all your company and say like, help me figure stuff out, right? Then each person gets their own custom assistant. Like each CEO would be like, hey, here's your CEO assistant. And it has all the data that you need right here. And, your ops people can have their own assistant. And I think that will happen. And I think it's just kind of like a matter of time.
It's exciting to see sort of the continued expansion and capabilities as like modern systems come online for you to be able to just add more and more. Like there's going to be no end in sight. I was just on this morning with an analyst from Morgan Stanley who covers the like accounting, payments, office of the CFO space. And they just wrote a report and they're just like so bullish still on a lot of the traditional incumbents because it's just like there's just so much room here and the market's so big. He's like, every single vertical could have 5 to 10 more companies, huge enduring companies that can exist. There's just so much opportunity once it starts working. So it's pretty exciting. But one of the challenges is with sort of continued investment from like incredible firms like First Round and YC and other firms that are investing in the space is how do you stand out? So we can sort of say you have like a really cool fresh take. You're building literally AI first in where people do work. Like it's a very easy, differentiated value prop to understand. And like when you see a demo, you can't like unsee it ever again, I think. But you still have to stand out, right? Like you still have to, there's a lot of noise in the crowd. So you come up with this corporate tagline called kill business bullshit.
Yeah.
I would say the safest corporate tagline around. Tell me a little bit more about what the background of that was and how did investors react to that?
Yeah. So this actually, we started using this. We were in the YC, and at YC, like you go to the retreat, and as a part of the retreat, you kind of like go up in front of the cohort and sort of just kind of do like a one line pitch, like here we're Central and we're doing this, right? And we've been talking through like all this different stuff, like we're Central, we're like an all in one back office, or something like that. And it just like it wasn't quite land. I mean, it would land, but it was just like it's like you had to like then kind of explain more about what this means, and it's like, well, what does that mean? What do you do? And so like right before we went on stage, I was talking with Nilay and Pranav about kind of what we were going to say, and we tried all these different taglines. I think with just people individually, like when they'd say, "Hey, where do you do?" And I think it was Nilay that was like, "We just deal with all the bullshit," and we started seeing people go, "Oh, nice, that's great," like yeah, there is a lot of bullshit they have to deal with, and so we went up on stage. And so when we said, "Hey, we're Central, and we're here to eliminate business bullshit," and people just like immediately resonated with it, and
So good.
and so we kind of did that. That sort of just took off. Like, hey, let's just like it's like it works from what we're trying to accomplish. And yeah, I also think just generally, you want to have a perspective, and you want to have like a little bit of kind of a character in what you're doing, and so. For us, it was just kind of perfect. Like we think of ourselves a little bit as the I don't know, we're kind of we're like the resistance. I think the ladies that are like we're like the resistance fighting the good fight against sort of all the bureaucracy, all this other stuff. So having this kind of edgy aspect to the brand, I think makes a lot of sense.
Yesterday I was wearing my Star Wars socks. I think today I'm wearing my dad socks because it was the first day of school. Any like reaction from investors when you sort of come up with this, spicy headline?
No, I mean, like I think everybody liked it. Maybe after this, my investors are right. I'd be like, actually, we didn't like it, and we just didn't tell you, But I think I've seen a lot about like the attention economy, right? And it's like really, you're just buying for attention at the end of the day. And I think just like doing the same thing that every other company's done, it never works. And so I think it's almost like when people are questioning, like, wait, why are they sure this okay? It's like, it's kind of a good, like you want people to emotionally react one way or the other. And you can see it like even in our brand, like if you go to our, website, then, it probably looks different than like most of the other payroll SaaS websites that you've seen. And, it's by design, I think it's like, it's all a part of the sort of just brand that we want to build.
I love it. I love it. So one of the other like questions that I'm sure you just had to deal with as a founder going out to raise money is like, yes, it's a big market. You're not only up against sort of very well established, decades old legacy incumbents, you're up against other venture backed startups that have raised billions. 8.6 is a lot of money. Don't get me wrong. Like, it's a huge, healthy round. I think it shows a sign of your ambition, but you still have to punch like way above your weight. How do you think about that?
It's a great question. First of all, I think like welcome to the plight of every startup founder, right? There's no question that it's an uphill battle, but I think that it's also freeing in a lot of ways. And like I said, it gives us the opportunity to take a really fresh take on how this problem can be solved, and it also lets us make some different decisions. So I think one example is this idea of focusing on founders and SMBs, right? Like there's only so much VC funding you can take before like that's no longer a viable option. And so I think, for us, it's like there is a big and growing segment of the market that is currently underserved. And I don't think that when we talk about like, yeah, payroll incumbents at large, like sure, that there are payroll companies. There's $100 billion payroll companies. There's a number of $10 billion payroll companies. But I still think amongst that sea, there's just such a gap here for solving this problem well for founders. And early on, I think, we're like, maybe the best path for us is going to be getting new companies, right? Like getting new companies. But then we started to see like, at first it was 10, then 20, then 30 and 40% like of new customers were actually migrating from these incumbents. And I think it was just like validation that yes, this pain point exists even with incumbents, and we're uniquely positioned to be able to solve these pain points very directly. And so, you know, I think it's keeping an eye on what we're trying to solve for and who we're trying to solve it for, and just doing the work day in and day out.
Yeah, I love it. It also helps, I think, one, that you come from a technical background as an engineer, post a world of AI, you get to like really start to think freshly from first principles. And you've lived the pain before going through YC. I'm guessing like 100% of YC in the batch is like they either have experienced the pain or they're about to experience the pain as well. So it's like, I think it's just an ideal starting point for this journey. There are a lot of founders today that are sort of like fighting this battle right now. What have you like learned starting Central that you think about, or maybe like what is your pitch today?
Eliminating business bullshit is our tagline, right? But I think the pitch is generally, first of all, are we talking to somebody who has experienced this pain before or not, right? Because I think if it's somebody that's not, there's a little bit of education, which is like, yeah, it might seem easy, but it turns out like you can't just Venmo people their payroll. Like there's actually like a lot of things that go into it. And then going down the list of like, well, did you know you have to do this? And did you know you have to do that? And did you know you have to do that? And then eventually you go, no, I had no idea. And we're like, okay, do you want to do those things? No, not really. And then it becomes very, very easy. But even easier is when folks are experiencing these pain points. They're hiring, especially like they're hiring somebody in new states, and they're getting these notices in the mail, and they're, or they're just trying to get some advice on something and they can't get a hold of anybody to get any help with. And that's when they come find it. And they're like, I'm just so tired. I don't want to spend any more time on this. And our promise to everybody is like, great, like that's the point of Central. So you don't have to spend time on this.
Yeah, well, the good news is there's, as soon as you solved all of the bullshit that exists today, we'll have a new administration in some city, some state, some federal government, and there'll be all sorts of new bullshit.
Yeah, it's an evergreen problem. It's an evergreen problem for us.
As long as we have politicians, we will have continued like bullshit along the way. Is there anything that changed from the very first, like a hypothesis when you first started Central to today, that sort of changed from the original idea to today?
Yeah, I mean, I think I mentioned earlier when we originally built Central, we kind of thought of it as like a bank that then it also does your payroll, and like you can also do benefits and all of these things. And it seemed at the time that being the bank was like really important to being able to solve like all this bullshit work. And I think like we found out, by talking to customers, like we rolled it out that way and talked to a bunch of customers, and like it turned out, really the problems that most founders face were things that had to deal with compliance. And I think on the banking side, it's like you're not dealing with the compliance. Like the banks are dealing with the compliance, but you're not dealing with it, right? So the founders really didn't have so much pain there. A lot of the pain came from the compliance side. And I think a second thing, as I mentioned, is like we kind of were wondering early, would we have to go get all of our customers from just the pool of companies who had never run payroll before, right? Or like had never who weren't operating. It was kind of like we'd have to go find new customers or new companies. And I think after doing this for a year or so, we were like, oh, actually, these are the ones that are coming inbound more and more, are these folks that are in this pain and looking to get out of it. So, I mean, there's tons of other smaller things. I think that you have these hypotheses on, in one way, a startup is just iterating through thousands and thousands of hypotheses and seeing what's true. But, I think actually in a broader sense, something that I have personally, I guess, maybe changed my mind on, if this is the right way to put it, but I used to be somebody that was like trying to I would be like getting advice from everybody and be like, okay, tell me what I should do here. What do you think I should do here? And I think one thing I've learned just as a founder over the last 2 years is you got to really trust yourself. And a lot of times, like, I don't say, we're on a podcast, so like, I don't want to don't take advice, right? But like, the truth is like, yeah, just like, don't take so much advice. Your situation is different. You're going to have more insight into it than anybody else. And there's endless amounts of advice to go around, but almost all of it is going to be worse than the thing that you're sort of intuitively feeling.
Here on that as a podcast host too. Actually, I don't really give out too much advice. I just like let people tell their stories, which I think is kind of fun. What do you see when people are starting sort of like, we have quite a bit of founders that listen and investors actually, that it's a bunch of these little things that eventually like add up to somebody going like, oh my God, why am I dealing with so much stuff? Or is it more like there's like these discrete scary events that like cause the trigger to like really want to sort of switch to Central?
I think you usually hit a breaking point. Part of it is like when they hear about Central, they're like, oh my God, I don't have to, like, I thought I just had to deal with all this stuff. Right. I mean, we had like on our website, I think we have a quote from Bonem, who is, he's like, yeah, I've used all the incumbents. He was a VC founder. He kind of went through the gamut, and he's like, before Central, I was spending 5 to 10 hours a week on this stuff, and now I don't spend any time. Right. And so I think a lot of folks that are like repeat founders are just like, yeah, this is just what you have to do, And then when they find out like, well, actually, maybe you don't have to do it, that becomes a trigger. But I think as people are hiring, that's always like a big trigger, because it triggers a lot of annoying compliance work that you have to do. Just sort of at each new hire, when they're ready to start getting benefits, when they're, there's a few points in, I think, the life cycle where it becomes more acute during that time. So, if a lot of times founders will just be like, hey, we need to get payroll. How do we do this? They have no idea. And luckily, we've built up a good reputation amongst founders, amongst a lot of the YC cohort and that use Central, that, more and more people just, say, don't worry about it, just use Central. And that's a good part of our referrals are a huge part of our inbound.
I bet it's like such a magical experience. You could see how that happens. I'm sure part of the fun about taking care of the back office bullshit is you get to see a lot of bullshit. What are some of like either the dumbest or the craziest things that you have seen? Obviously, don't name company names, but like, would love to just hear some stories. I'm sure you have a ton.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of times it's just like people just misunderstand things, right? Like one thing that I see like probably more often than I would have expected is founders, they'll be paying themselves as a contractor, and we're like, what? Why are you doing that? And they're like, oh, to save on taxes. And I'm like, no, that's not how that works. Like, you still have to pay just as many taxes. Like, now it's just the liabilities like on a slightly different side. That one always, like, I think cracks me up a little bit. I think there's a lot of questions around unpaid internships that we see, folks stumbling into. But I think a lot of what I would consider the dumbest stuff is just not realizing the value of their time. And less so, I think, with the folks that do join Central. I think they're sort of self-selecting into like, we understand the value of our time and we don't want to spend our time doing it. But, we've had customers in the past who are in the details on some really just like things that aren't going to help their business succeed. And, I think in a lot of ways, like we say, like, yeah, that's not our target customer. Like our target customer are people who are like, hey, I want to go build my company and not be working on this stuff. But you'd be surprised with how in the weeds some people can get on things that just absolutely have no impact on the success or failure of their company. And
Oh, dude, I get this all the time with first-time founders in accounting. They're like, I'm pretty smart. Like I could just pick this up, and you're like, dude, it takes like 6 years to become a CPA, and it's one of the hardest tests you have to take for certification. You're not going to pick it up in like a 10-minute blog post or like messing around with it. It also isn't going to help you make your company better. You should understand your financial health. You could understand the drivers of it, but you shouldn't be doing actual accounting work. Like that's crazy. Understand the risks and liabilities, but like I almost like don't talk to first time founders too much anymore because it's just like
again, you have to do this whole education aspect of it. Yeah, and it's funny. Yeah, we've had folks that where we've said like, hey, do you want to do bookkeeping with Central too? And they're like, no, we'll just do it ourselves. And we're like, okay. I mean, that's fine. They're like, yeah, I know I've done this before. And it's like, it's not that you can't do it. Like nobody's like, you can't possibly do this thing. It's just, why is that the thing that's the most valuable way you could spend your time? We've had folks that are like, no, I'll just do my state registrations. And it's like, okay, I mean, it's fine. Like yeah, it's just so low on the list of priorities for as a founder what I think you should be doing, right? And that's why we wanted to eliminate those things. But yeah, it is an interesting phenomenon.
yeah. I'm sure we can go on and on with stories of people's misunderstanding of how compliance works, but we'll save that for another podcast. What's something else about the future that you believe that you think others might not?
Yeah, I think that like the startup and SMB space is going to be the biggest. It's already like by volume the biggest segment, but I mean like for VC funded companies, I think the startup and SMB space will become this like massive market. Like traditionally it was like you start a company, you go get SMBs, then like you work on going to mid market, and then like you work and go to enterprise, and that was like the playbook. I don't think a whole lot of people are fully bought into this shit. I think you just see some folks that are having this thesis, but I think especially because of AI, we're going to see the ability to get like margins of businesses down further to where it makes more financial sense to focus on startups and SMBs. And I also think that that market is going to grow tremendously in terms of size. More people starting companies, especially folks that are using Central, is like removing the friction. More people start companies, and then they stay smaller for longer because they're able to get more done with less folks. And so naturally, that just means that part of the pie is going to grow a ton.
Yeah, I haven't quite figured out how to articulate this very well, but the thing that I get the most excited about AI is it changes a little bit of the return of investment, and it lowers the denominator, meaning you can have something that has the same return to a company, but if the cost of building it or deploying it is so much lower, you can now create this value that used to be the enterprise, and then it like creeped out of the mid market. You can now create these magical experiences in a cost effective way for small businesses, for like the millions and millions of small businesses where this help actually changes the trajectory of their company in such a meaningful way. And so that's the part that I'm the most excited about in the small business world and AI. Cool. Well, Josh, thanks for joining us. I think for any founder who is excited about the bullshit, then, you can keep doing it. And for those that don't, you should check out Central. Where can people like learn more?
Yeah, CentralHQ.com.
Nice and easy. CentralHQ.com. Cool. Well, go check it out. Josh, congrats on the round. Thanks for joining us, and keep up the good work.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Sasha. Really enjoyed it.
Thanks for listening to Tech Finance with Puzzle and Turpentine. If you got value from this episode, please share it with anybody building or funding the future of technology. And please leave us a review wherever you're listening and tell me about what you want to hear more of. If you're looking for accounting software you'll actually love to power your company, check out Puzzle.io, the modern accounting platform for the AI era. Tech Finance is part of Turpentine, the awesome podcast network behind Econ 102 with Noah Smith, Turpentine VC, Complex Systems with Patrick McKenzie, and so many more.